Thank you. If there are no more questions to Professor Jayal, we can engage in the general discussion. And in the general discussion, we may address questions to all the speakers of the day. But still, I have on the list 4 people who asked for the floor with questions to Dr. Weigel. The first one would be Professor Buttiglione, but he has evaporated. Then we have Professor Mazurkiewicz.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your presentation. And at first I will say that I'm coming from the country which is the biggest supporter of the EU integration. We just celebrated the 15th anniversary of our accession, and in the recent polls, 91% of Poles are satisfied with this. So on the West, only inhabitants of Luxembourg can compete with Poles. But at the same time, there are some problems. And on the one hand, Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI wrote that 50 years ago, in the German constitution, there was put reference to God. 50 years later, it was impossible to do the same with the constitutional treaty. Pope Francis, when he was in Strasbourg, he compared the EU to sterile grandmother who lost the moral boussole. So there are some problems. At my university, we are just analyzing the EU policy. We are talking on the dispute of 2 anthropologies. So that the biggest challenge is anthropological in Europe today. And on the one hand, still you have laws and policy, and also some politicians referring to Christian anthropology. But on the other hand, you have this competing materialistic anthropology. And also politics, laws referring just to this. And to Central Europe, if this materialistic anthropology is coming today, it's not coming from Moscow anymore, but from Brussels. So this is challenging, and especially I'm thinking about gender ideology and so on. So question which we can say are not in the competence of the EU, but really are the most crucial today, like the question concerning life issue, marriage, family. On the other hand, there is a rise of so-called populism, Euroscepticism in different societies, and at the time of Danish accession to the EU, a Copenhagen group elaborated this concept of societal security or ontological security. So saying that if we would like to avoid tensions in the future in European integration, we should preserve not only the security of states, but also the security of nations in Europe. And that if this second kind of security will not be granted, in this moment, in the societies, starting with Denmark, will arise the fear that they can disappear in the European melting pot. I think that this is not enough considered today. In the recent book of a Bulgarian, Ivan Krastiev, with the title After Europe, but the Italian translation has title Ultimi giorni dell'Unione Europea. He's referring to the reasons for this fear in the societies, to fear of losing the identity. I think that this is something which should be more considered in the EU policy. Then, when we talk on the subsidiarity issue, the subsidiarity in the EU law is not the same as the subsidiarity in Catholic social teaching, because that's only on the relationship between the highest level and the level of the nation states, member states. So there's a misunderstanding if we try to sell the EU principle as our principle. It's not the same. And the last, the question is that in the EU law now, we can, in my understanding, with my experience, we can talk already on confessional policy of the EU. So that there was a lot of references to religion, churches, confessional groups, and so on in the EU law, primary and secondary, and also a lot of laws which indirectly have the impact on the church positions. So we can say that also there is a kind of corpus of the law on religion in the EU. And just to finalize this, I will just give an example. Recently, the EU changed the regulation data protection. In this regulation, you have an Article 89, which is granting the possibility to have an autonomous system for the churches. But only if you integrate into the canon law the terminology and solutions taken from the EU law. So that EU law has to become a part of canon law to preserve church autonomy. That's a very specific situation.
Dr. Weigel.
Thank you. I also was disappointed that we were not successful to bring the responsibility against God in the Constitution. But it was not possible. If I'm not able to convince some countries, it is not possible. And then I cannot say, now Europe is coming to an end. In Germany, we have it in the Constitution. It was constituted in 48, 49. At that time, it was possible. Also, the socialists and the communists were ready to accept this. If we now would have a discussion in Germany, we would not be successful. And that was the reason why I resisted against a new constitution in Germany. Some people, many people at that time said, now we should create a new constitution, maybe a compromise between Western and Eastern Germany. And I said, no, it's not possible with me and my party, because we would not have got a better constitution. And also in the Bavarian constitution is the respect against God. And that is fine. But if we now would have a discussion, we would not be possible to convince the others. And therefore we have to live with this situation we have. And we have another situation as in 49 or in 46. I am disappointed, but I cannot change it. And therefore, I have to respect the situation. Yes, it's right. There are many materialistic thinking tanks and politicians in Europe. But I think in the European currency system, with the Treaty of Maastricht, we have created a social market in Europe. not only a market-oriented system. And of course, we have to do more for the social systems in Europe. You are right, we could do more for the family, and I have a relative conservative opinion of family. But we have other majorities. In the big discussion about the paragraph 280 in 18 in Germany, we were not successful. We had not a majority. Then I have to accept that it is better to have advice for any family and for every woman. It's better than to have nothing. But we, at that time, also we, in the Christian Social Union, in the Christian Democratic Union, we were not assisted from the Vatican. That was a big problem for us. And we have no majority to do more. I think it's right to see the sovereignty and identity of nations. Yes, that is necessary, and we will have it the next 50 years, I think so. Maybe later it's not so important, but the next time it's important. We should respect this. And subsidiarity is not only a thing against the nation, but also against the region, to bring it down. I think that is important. And I think the Committee of the Regions in the EU should play a more important role. And the last, it's interesting that an agnostic philosopher as Habermas now sees it's necessary to have a religious thinking in a country. It's absolutely necessary to have a good situation and responsibility in the society. It's interesting that he is, since some years, and I heard the discussion with Ratzinger a long time ago in the Catholic Academy in Munich, and it was very interesting at that time. I have forgotten to answer one question before, the political idea and how can we have a revival of the political European idea. I think one is peace, of course. The best book, I think, about the First World War wrote Christopher Clark. I think excellent. And I asked him some years ago also in the Catholic Academy in Bavaria, what is the difference between 1914 and 2014? And he said, it's easy to say that. It's the existence of the European Union, the only institution which is able to prevent war, and we didn't have it in centuries before. That is one. The other is no other institution as the European Union is able to create and enforce democracy. It's wonderful that the former satellite states and the Baltic states are now democratic states. Not excellent, not fulfilled, but on the way to this. I think it's great. And we have a social partnership, not only capitalism. Also that is good. And we are only in Europe able to resist against a claim or a program from Trump, my country first. And that is contrary. Not only my country is first, then to be and to do it together with other countries. And I think it's wonderful that young people, pulse of Europe, are now going to the places, to the streets, and demonstrating pro-Europe, first time. But I don't see the Catholic youth at the places. There were nobody from the youth party from the Youth Young Union, from my party there. I cannot understand this. Okay? And then I think there we should propose them, we should power them to do that. And I think we should do more to support partnerships between cities, districts, and regions. They are doing a wonderful work, I think. We should support him more. And I think it is a good idea from Manfred Weber, the candidate for the European Commission, when he tries to demand interrail ticket for all young people. If young people are becoming 18, they should get such a ticket to go 4 weeks or 6 weeks through Europe. I think that's good. And maybe we have to think something about stories. I know when I tell some stories, young people say, okay, the old man, always the same stories. But sometimes I'm discussing very often with young people in schools and universities, they notice something. On the grave of my brother in France, there are coins. There are coins. Why? There is a cemetery, and there is a community center for young people all over Europe. And they take care of the graves. And I think that is wonderful. And the leader of this center tells them about the fate of some people from the 15,000s. And sometime he goes to the grave of my brother, and he says, please give me a coin. And they give them a coin, and he says, look at the coin. One side is nation side, but the other side is European. When the 15,000 died, all sides were only nation side nationalism. And that is the difference to the time of today. And therefore, also a coin, also a currency can help to cooperate in Europe.
Thank you. Professor Zuboff.
Thank you. I want to start from the point Professor Weigel, yes, is finished. You see, not only coins, but also banknotes. In banknotes, there was only in Latin euro. Then Greek was added. And now you see in 5, 10, and 20 euros is Cyrillic letters. Cyrillic letters also. If you don't believe, please see. Yes, and it's very pleasant since no one state with Cyrillic letters is a part of this Euro communion, because Bulgaria has Lev, not Euro. So it's all, and for us, for Russians, it's very serious sign. We know that in Estonia and Latvia, part of population is Russians and use Russian language. So for them, for the first hand, you write these Cyrillic letters, and maybe in future, in a distant future, for us, we hope so, and for Ukrainians. And for Bulgarians, of course also. It's not a question, it's an idea. But 2 questions. To one question you have already semi-answered, but just now. This question is, you are absolutely right, and I remember it also clearly, that the fathers who established European Union, the start to establish European Union, Schuman, De Gasperi, Konrad Adenauer, they think for the first hand not on economic prosperity, but for peace. After 2 terrible wars, they want to establish peace in Europe, and they designed, I suppose, genius idea through economics to unification. And now, in today's Europe, it's a brilliant idea, and a miracle occurred. What we have now as European Union, it's a miracle. As a historian, I'm sure, it's impossible to build such a state, such a union in Europe, and for 75 years we have no war between European states. It's impossible, but it takes place. And I want to ask now, people in European Union, young people, newly taken to European Union, East European states, they understand this goal, because it's possible even to go to some unpleasant things with refugees, to pay more money, etc. But for peace, it's possible to do many things. If it is idea active now, actual now, European Union is a union for peace in Europe and in some way in the world. And the second question is, you see, you many times mentioned that today is not the time of the end of 1940s, when the idea of God was accepted into German constitution, etc. Yes, really. And this understanding of two wars and tragedy of Nazism, of fascism in Italy, produced different mentality in Western Europe. Absolutely different mentality. And European Union was one of the results of it, maybe the main one. But countries, nations of former communist bloc, I mean this Poland, Czech Republic, Baltic states, they, just as we in Russia, we lost this period of time because we live in absolutely different world which conservate ideas of the First World War or between wars. We lost the new mentality of Europe because we had this Iron Gate, you see. And when you, and I feel it each day in Russia, and I see it in Ukraine, and when you accepted into European Union these former communist countries from east part of Germany up to Estonia, do you feel different attitude to these European values without this inner understanding of anti-war intention? Or these nations changed in this quarter of a century after independence from communism? What do you think about this?
We have discussed this at dinner, and I think it was very impressive from you to hear your impression. And I think it's very important for the EU to have a consistent strategy against also Russia. And therefore, I think it's very important that all countries within, as example, Finland, who has a very long border to Russia, were able to confirm and to support this strategy. And I think that is necessary to say we are open, we are ready every time. But you must see treaties must be safe, and you cannot go away from the treaties, and so on. And therefore, we should say, okay, we make steps, but you have to make steps, and then we can get to more cooperation, as we had in 89 and 90 together with Gorbachev. And at that time, it was a miracle that Gorbachev was able to accept that Europe was combined again and Germany was reunificated. I think that was a miracle. And now we are very far distant from that situation. And I think we need long time and we need power and we should do everything, but it's not easy to do it with Putin. That is the point. And I do not assist the politicians in Germany who are very ready to make contracts in business with him. I think that is not the right way to come to a good solution.
I want to add only one, Mark. Sometimes you said about your party. Our party, Social Union, Christian Social Union, has some politics. Our party, Party of People's Freedom, Palnas Party, with Kasyanov as a leader of this party, we are also in absolutely different attitude to the future of Russia and to the future of Russia-Ukrainian and Russia-European Union relations than Putin. So you ought to understand that in Russia we have different forces and different movements. And our inclination is to unification with Europe and to establish peaceful relations with Ukraine and return Crimea to Ukraine, of course, and Donbass also. So I think that it is a possibility for Russia, but not for Putin's Russia.
I think it's absolutely necessary for Russia to have this cooperation with Europe. They cannot alone make the transformation from the old economy to a social market economy, also with small businessmen and so on. And therefore, they need the help of Europe and from the Western side. And we should explain, yes, we are ready to do this, but under conditions.
We had a question from the gentleman over there. Please. Okay, then we have Professor Zamani.
Two specific questions to Dr. Weininger. One is again on the subsidiarity. I'm sorry. Yeah. As you know, the subsidiarity principle admits three different versions: vertical, horizontal, and circular. Now, the subsidiarity principle, if we want to take it seriously, we have to accept that the three versions are in a multiplicative relations, not additive. In other words, no trade-off. One cannot trade off the vertical version against the horizontal. It seems to me that in the European Union, vertical subsidiarity, it's okay, but not horizontal and even less circular. That is the main problem today. And most people do not understand that. For instance, that is why, for instance, we talk about a fiscal compact, which is okay, but why don't we talk about a civil compact? Because the idea of subsidiarity is not a technical mean to organize public power, but is a conception of the role of civil society in the model of social order. In Europe, the model of social order is dominated by the bipolar model, state and market. And civil society, it comes later as a second hand or third hand. So that is why the subsidiarity principle, if we want it, we have to apply totally in a multiplicative way and not in an additive way as it is done now. In this regard, the other specific point has to do with the social market economy. It seems to me that a major mistake has been done at the time of the Maastricht Treaty, when the expression social market economy was embodied in the Maastricht Treaty, with no indication of the interpretation. As you know better than anybody else, the social market economy has its root in the ordoliberalismus, which was developed in the 30s, 20s, and 30s, Freiburg, etc. But as you know, they are not the same thing. So some people interpret the social market economy as an expression of ordoliberalismus. Other people, they interpret it in the social democratic way. And in fact, that is the reason why the German Social Democratic Party in the Congress, I believe in 1954, they accepted the social market economy, which was in those days, your party or the people representing your party were object. So don't you think that it would be proper to clarify once for all what do we really mean by social market economy? Because the definitions which are circulating are defective, because they do not get at the point. Because it is obvious that ordoliberalismus is something very specific. And since nowadays, in particular, neoliberalism is under attack, people use the social market economy. But most of the time, the two are equivalent. Let me conclude. There is, in a famous speech in 1952 by De Gasperi, that I'm sure that will make you happy. He said, Europe can be unified only by two elements, currency and defense. That was 1952. Now, we have been able to unify currency, but not defense. We do not have a European defense policy, etc. What do you think about that?
I can make it very short. I agree to all what you said. But only two comments. Subsidiarity. You are right. It's not only vertical, but only from state to the society. I know from Jean-Claude Juncker that there is a committee or a group to work what is subsidiarity and how can subsidiarity works. And I think we should make from the Catholic side proposals and to intervene in this discussion and to help to fulfill this with comments. I think we could do that. And maybe if Manfred Weber could succeed, he's a person from our side, an absolutely convinced Catholic man, very, very convinced, very convinced. And I think with him we could do something in this way. You are right. We should do more to explain what was the concept of Ludwig Erhard. Soziale Marktwirtschaft, social market-oriented policy. And that's very important, I think, to get more acceptance in Europe. If we only have a capitalistic system, we will not get the acceptance of the young people. If young people in some countries do not have employment, 30 or 40%, we cannot expect that these people would be convinced from the European idea. That is right. And I think one big disappointment was that in 1945, the defense system, the European army was resisted in the France parliament. And now we, 15 years later, 60 years later, we try to do something in this sense. Maybe not a European army, but more cooperation in this thing. And I think that would be necessary. Also, more cooperation in the development policy than to develop an Africa project. That would be helpful. And that would be interesting projects, also popular for the young people.
Yes. Now we have a question from On my left, you. Yes.
Thank you. I wanted to return to this question of Europe, as we could consider that it was a big achievement, but it has been done as a top-down project in 50s, 60s. Now we are confronted in Europe with a bottom-up contestation of the project. How to reconcile the values of what we have achieved over these decades in Europe with the challenges that the new generations are confronted with. How to explain to younger people that staying together, keeping together is the best way to respond to challenge of globalization, of international security, of developing Africa and other parts that could, in the case of failing development, invade Europe by forced migration. How to confront also this challenge of the so-called sovereign democracy that we've seen this concept coming from Russia as another concept of compared to this multilateral rules-based democracies and systems that we are practicing in Europe. How to find a new narratives about Europe. This is the big challenge. You alluded to this concept or your dream of seeing United States in Europe, but we need to find narratives, language, how to do it. I'm confronted with this question as European ambassador, first to Ukraine and now to the Holy See, but the question of narratives is very important now.
I tried to answer it before, and I can only tell you it's very interesting and very satisfying for me to go in schools, to go to young people, to discuss with them, and I see there is a big positive answer. But we must do it. And I see the youth also in my party, they didn't engage in Europe the last 10 years. And I criticize this, and I try to do that. The European policy in my party in the last 2 years was not very excellent in Bavaria. And last year, I invited Chancellor Merkel to Oderbeuren. In Oderbeuren, a very fine cathedral at that time, and in the 50s and 60s, we had big events there with cardinals, bishops, all politicians from Europe, Franz Josef Strauss, Helmut Kohl, and so on. And I alone, with some friends, made a European symposium. And we invited Chancellor Merkel, and she came. And he said, and I invited also the new Bavarian Prime Minister, Söder. In former time, he was a little resistant against Europe. He came, and now he made a very positive speech to Europe. And since that time, the strategy and the course of my party is absolutely pro-Euro. Therefore, I think we can do something, and I think the young people are open also for new narratives.
Professor Suarez Orozco again.
Thank you so much. T.S. Eliot once said, "Bad poets borrow, good poets steal." I will steal a question from my next door neighbor. and that flows from the matter of NATO and security. And I wonder if you could comment on the following exchange. Just last week at the American Academy of Arts and Sciences in Cambridge, we organized an interesting roundtable with former U.S. Secretary of Defense, Ash Carter, and the former U.S. Secretary of Energy, Ernie Moniz. And astonishingly, the Secretary of Energy commented on the fact that today there is no high command communication between the United States military and the Russian military. I wonder if you could comment on your position, your years of experience with the European Common Market, to reflect upon that, NATO, security, and the stability in the context of the new normal, which is non-communication.
I'm not a specialist for defense, of course. Okay? I remember Helmut Schmidt had a very good relationship to him, said sometime to me, Theo, you must be the next defense minister in Germany. And I said, never. I will never do this. All other positions are possible, but not. Therefore, I am not a specialist for this question. But I think NATO is absolutely necessary, and it's disappointing that the President, Trump, sometimes makes remarks which are not good for the security in Europe and in the world. I think it was one of the best examples to create NATO in the 40s. And it was very, very helpful for us in Germany that we could join it in '54. Therefore, we could survive the problems that the failure of the European Defense Army some weeks, some months before. I think it's absolutely necessary, but Europe must do more than its departure. The criticism of the Americans that Europe, also Germany, is not doing enough, I think is right. And it's not easy also to convince the people in Germany, but I think it's necessary.
Professor Wielecki.
Forgive me, please. I couldn't understand this contradiction between preventing against war and such values, especially a Catholic version of these values as life, family, and marriage. And second, why the unification of a market requires unification of philosophy of human being and moral philosophy? Maybe I something wrong understood.
We were not able in the last 20, 30 years to convince the people from the only Catholic points. We were not able to do that. And I have to accept this. I'm not satisfied with this. I try to do what I can. But if I have not the majority, I have to see how can I find compromise which are better than a solution which is not totally acceptable for us. And that is the security of human being. I think some solutions in some countries are absolutely unacceptable for us, but I have to see also in this point, in Germany we have no majority to fulfill a solution which is totally confirmed with the Catholic theology. We cannot, we were not able to do this, and although the Catholic Church and also the Protestant were not able to convince the majority of the people. What shall I do? Shall I then end my political position to try to convince the people? No, I don't think so. I must try and must do more and try to convince the people, but sometimes I have to respect the results of decisions.
Yes, now Professor Matlari.
Thank you. Since you mentioned defense here, I would like to add something, as this is something I write and work a lot on. The best solution is a working relationship of division of labor between the EU and NATO, because the EU is not going to become a defense actor in any strategic sense. It can become a market facilitator for research and development, etc. And if there's one area where President Trump is right, we are usually loath to give him rights in any way, but he is right in the insistence on burden sharing inequality with Europe. And here I'm afraid Germany holds the key, being such a rich country and spending so little on defense in terms of GDP percentage. I shouldn't brag, Norway has 1.6%, and we're quite concerned about Russia. Germany has 1.3% and has announced that one will not reach the 2% by 2024. Other countries do not intend to reach 2% either, but they don't announce it. So I think this is it's very important that one sees that NATO does the deterrence of Russia, and it is a handful of NATO countries that are serious in deterring Russia, because it's not only money, but it is risk willingness. So you can't deter if you're not scaring the ones you try to deter. Germany's role apparently is not changing very much in terms of risk willingness either. So Germany, in a way, it holds the key to spending more. It holds the key to developing more of a European role, but the states that do war fighting and risk-taking are basically France and the UK among the big ones. So leaving the EU, Brexit, will detract a lot from any ideas of a European alternative to NATO, so to speak. And in that respect, it's dangerous to entertain these ideas publicly and solemnly, Europa here, etc., because there's no reality to that without the presence of Britain. So that was just a bit of cold shower in this debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the possibility to make some comments. You must see the last 30 years, Germany has every year given 4 to 5% for reunification and for creating democracy in Eastern Europe and for the states coming after the Soviet Union. 4 to 5% every year. The last 30 years, 2,500 billion euros, and that's a lot. And that's also in the interest of the other states of Europe. We have not oil as Norway, and it was not easy to bring that, but we did it. An American businessman asked me some years ago, Theo, to buy the GDR, I think was a bad acquisition. I was very angry about this question. And then I answered, okay, you are right. It took longer, and it was very not cheap to finance this every year. But the whole of Germany is now a stable democracy. And we did a lot, 100 billion we gave at that time to the successor states of the Soviet Union to make stability in this point. And 50 millions in the 90s we gave to the Middle and Eastern states in Europe to help them. That was a lot. I know no other state in Europe which did so much for the stability in Europe. And therefore, okay, we should do more for the defense system, but we did a lot for the stability in Europe.
We have a question of Professor Reichberg.
Question about a monetary issue. So I wonder whether our colleague here might want to jump back in before mine, because he had started. Yeah, you can. Yeah.
Well, very.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's okay. One of the ways in which the European Union, and particularly the narrowest of those concentric circles you described, is the imbalance between the integration on the monetary side and the lack of integration on the fiscal side. So I think many people would say that for an accountable, democratically accountable European Union, or at least the Eurozone, that you would have to have a significantly bigger common budget as well. As you know, currently the European Union budget is only about 1% of the total GDP of the area, and that's not anything in light of what modern fiscal authorities do in terms of risk sharing throughout the economic union, in terms of counter-cyclical macroeconomic management, in terms of having a public investment budget. So the question in brief is how do you see the role of a common fiscal policy in this subsidiarity, and how do we think about the role that Germany has played all along in terms of resisting essentially significantly enlarging the common fiscal budget and throwing cold water on Emmanuel Macron's plans, for example, in that domain? Is a long-term Eurozone feasible that doesn't have significant more fiscal integration alongside its single market and monetary integration?
Only for my person, I can say I can also live with a budget, with a European budget. I can do that. But we should begin not with a big amount. We should begin with a little budget and then to see how is it functioning, how is it necessary, what can we do. And we have assisted, and I have assisted personally, all help programs, structural programs we have made, and you know that Germany has done a lot and has taken the most risks in Europe to help these 4 or 5 countries, and that is necessary. What we should do more is also to see the confidence of the treaties, the confidence and the reality of the criteria. And the criteria are not only a theoretical thing, it's necessary for the states, for every state. And the confidence of currency also depends on the figures the states have to do. And there we have some progress, but not enough. I think some things, insurance, we could do more step by step, but under conditions. We created the European currency not in one day. That were 20 years. 79, the European currency system, and we need 20 years to 99, 1st January, to create the new currency. We did it step by step. The Treaty of Maastricht had 3 steps. The first steps, the freedom of a capital market, and then introduction of the European Currency Institute, and then to fulfill the criteria the evaluation of the fiscal policy in 97 with the real figures. And there we did it step by step.